Good evening, gospel revolutionaries around the whole world. This is Michael Lilborn Williams coming to you live from the Queen City once again, right here in Clarksville, Tennessee. It is trying to turn spring. I hope it is where you are also. Folks, I don't want to do a whole lot tonight except to wish all of you a very, very wonderful Valentine's Day. It's the day we celebrate love, and there's nothing that demonstrates love greater than the work of the cross. It was the way that God demonstrated his love to us, according to the teachings of Paul. And there was no greater way for God to demonstrate his love than through that. A lot of people want to bypass that, the way God chose to demonstrate his love. A lot of people want to minimize the way that God chose to demonstrate his love. But here at the Gospel Revolution, we want to receive the full impact of that. There's a reason for that. Let me read you a couple of verses here, and then I want to tell you a story. This is Romans 8. You've heard me teach from it many times. Most of you know this chapter pretty much by heart. And it starts out, there is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Christ Jesus, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. For the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus hath made me free from the law of sin and death. There's no greater gospel message than that, is this powerful understanding that all condemnation is gone. Paul follows up on that in verse 8. He says, so then they that are in the flesh cannot please God, but you are not in the flesh. Please let me emphasize that. Paul said you are not in the flesh, if so be the Spirit of God dwells in you. Now, we know who the Spirit of God dwells in. That is everyone now. And that the gospel declares, Paul declared, Apollos declared, the scriptures declare, all of that good news absolutely, definitively, repetitively, obsessively, we get to know that powerful understanding. But everybody that the Spirit of God dwells in, you're not in the flesh anymore. That's not where you live. You are in the Spirit. Honestly, again, not trying to plug the conference, but that's how the Revelation starts out, is John being in the Spirit on the Lord's Day. And we're going to go into that and show you what that meant in context in the Revelation. But you're in the Spirit, if so be that God dwells in you. That's what being in the Spirit means. Being in the Spirit doesn't mean being spiritual. Being in the Spirit doesn't mean you do everything right. Being in the Spirit does not mean you are not breaking any of God's laws. Yes, you can be and are in the Spirit at the same time you are breaking God's laws. Which ones? All of them. Because the work of the cross so far supersedes the work of the law under Moses that it has completely obliterated the issue of sin. Paul goes on here to say, now if any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he's none of his. He's just making it very clear that having Christ, being in Christ, and having God are all the same thing. This is the man who's already taught in chapter 5 that everyone is redeemed. The entire chapter, the entire book is all about that. He even goes into chapter 10 to explain that it's not your faith. He wants to make sure that you know it's not by you calling on the Lord. It's not by you believing. It's not by you exercising your faith. That faith does not come by hearing, and hearing by the word. Because after that, Paul says, "But I say unto you." This is didn't people believe? Why didn't it work then? So then he goes on to quote the prophets, who said that he was found by them that didn't even look, didn't believe, didn't look, didn't search, didn't ask. That's the good news of the gospel. And if Christ be in you, the body is dead because of sin, but the spirit is life because of righteousness. And you're in the spirit, therefore you are righteous. Here on this Valentine's Day, I really got a really wonderful Valentine's Day present. Actually, we got two of them in the ministry. One was a gentleman by the name of Glenn calling in to sign up for the newsletter for his very first time. So we appreciate that. Glenn, if you happen to be watching these videos, this is our Valentine's gift to you. We want to say Happy Valentine's Day to you. And we want to say Happy Valentine's Day to somebody else. And that's a lady by the name of Misty, who is from over on the eastern part of the United States. And Barry Laney has been very powerfully instrumental in touching this girl's life. And she was just absolutely desperate. Barry started posting his website on places that just had anything to do with grace at all. So he's posting things there. It's been a brilliant idea, and we appreciate him doing that. And then posting links to the Gospel Revolution and to all of this. So we also want to send out a Happy Valentine's Day to Barry Laney. We're really sending it out to everybody, but there's been 2 or 3 people that I really wanted to say this to very directly. I've already called others. And Hazel's already got her call. My daughter got her call. And but this girl then at Barry's prompting gave me a call. I saw a number that I didn't recognize. Many times I will let those go to voicemail because many times, you know, there's so many telemarketers and things. And I let it go to voicemail, and then I checked to see if there's any voicemail messages from those unidentified numbers that have left a message, that if they knew that I might not know who was calling, that they would at least leave a message. But I picked this one up. And from the moment that I picked up the call, this young girl started crying. And she was reaching out in absolute desperation. After 2 years ago, I found out in the conversation, her having a salvation experience with a church in her area that by the time she got to the full gospel, the non-denominational, the all-inspired, you know, it's like I said to her, I said, honey, the longer the name, the more legalistic they are. And so at least with, if it just says Baptist or Methodist or Presbyterian, you kind of know what you're getting in for. But somehow these people gained access to Misty's life, or she sought them out. I don't know which way happened. But after that point, of course, she was told that she received this wonderful gift by the grace of God. But since then, she's been taught about nothing except sin. Sin, and sin's not even listed in any of the Bible. How many of you knew Lucky Charms was a sin? How many of you knew the color red was a sin? She went down a list of things that she's had to do over the last 2 years that has required her to purge her house of books, recordings, owls. You know, it just seems like anything that was red. I'm not getting rid of my Johnny Walker Red Label. That you could, that anything, isn't it amazing? You say, well, Mike, we know how bad it can get. No, you don't. I know we've all been through this, but folks, There are people out there suffering so tremendously under the bondage of legalism, under the bondage of sin. I mean, as we've just told you, I think in the last video, that people are ministering sin, not righteousness. You're not supposed to be ministering sin. Sin was defeated 2,000 years ago. We're to be ministers of righteousness. And, until you start that, don't call yourself a minister. But that's what we are. We are ministers of God's righteousness. We are here to let you know about his righteousness. We can't give you God's righteousness. In fact, even the gospel doesn't give you God's righteousness. The blood of the cross gave you God's righteousness. And so that's a settled deal. We share the good news about that. And but you've got to realize that this planet is saturated with non-denominational churches, denominational churches that are putting people into such deep bondage. When I was talking to Misty, she mentioned the issue of dealing with OCD. I don't know if she had dealt with it before she got involved with this church or not, but she was telling me how wonderful it was to hear the gospel. She started listening, and she said that she wakes up from a fright almost every morning and in the middle of the night with fears about hell. And so I tried to share some things that might comfort her a bit with that. And then she said, and you'll recognize this, because once we become sin conscious, you begin to see everything as sin, everything as something's wrong with you. And she said she was crying again, and she said, I'm afraid that even listening to the gospel has become an OCD thing for me. And I thought, well, that's very interesting. And she said, because I have to listen to it. I have to listen to it in the morning. And I said, well, what does that do for you? She says, well, if I listen to it and I listen to it throughout the day, by the time I go to bed, I'm at peace. And then when I go to sleep, she said, these dreams and things happen and I wake up in a fright. And I asked her, I said, Misty, I said, honey, let's see if I understand OCD. And please understand that I do not claim to be an authority on any of these mental illnesses. And if I ever imply that I know anything other than a personal experience, I ask you to ignore those things. But I said to her, I said, isn't OCD, I said, is your understanding of OCD when you do something obsessively and compulsively that is not a benefit to you or to anybody else? Like washing your hands every 5 minutes, or straightening the things on the counter or on the desk, and that they've got to lay just this way or that way. And says, that doesn't benefit anybody, does it? She said, no, it doesn't. And she said, yeah, that's OCD. And I said, so now if you had a rash on your leg, and you found a cream that if you applied that cream every hour, then the pain and the itch of the rash on your leg would be soothed. Then you'd get relief from that, but you needed to apply it every hour until it was well. And I said, just because you're doing that repetitively and compulsively every hour, would that be OCD? And she said, no, that wouldn't be OCD. And I said, no. I said, I want you to think about you're listening to the gospel. And I asked her, I said, when you listen to the gospel, you actually feel better, right? And it's like a light bulb came on. And she said, oh, I don't have to worry about OCD because I'm listening to the gospel too much. Folks, there's some of you out there that need to develop a good dose of OCD when it comes to listening to the gospel. It'll save your soul. Our dear sweet friend Misty her soul is being saved day by day just by listening at things like this. And so happy Valentine's Day to all of you. We really do have this very palpable feeling of love towards those of you who listen, those of you who support what we do, and we care. We really do care. And yes, you really can just dial my number and get me. Love you guys.